On this episode of This Week in Linux, we have a lot of distro news from Mageia, Antix, Calculate Linux, and NixOS. Zabbix monitoring tool issued a new long-term support release. We'll talk about the upcoming release of KDE Plasma 5.14 and the preview release for Krita 4.2. We'll check out a cool application that makes it easier to make your own GTK theme. And later in the show, we'll cover the big Google Plus news of it being shut down. Then we'll round out the show with some Linux gaming and the always exciting, audience favorite, news about technology patents. All that and much more coming up. I'm Michael Tunnell with Tux Digital, and it's your weekly source for Linux news. KDE Plasma 5.14 is coming tomorrow on the 9th, the Tuesday, and with it comes a lot of interesting new features, but mostly are fixing and polishing of existing features. But there are a couple things that a lot of people have been looking forward to, and one of them is the presentation mode, which is similar to Caffeine, if you've ever heard of that, which allows you to disable your screensaver and make sure that your computer doesn't go to sleep or turn the monitor off and things like that. So presentation mode essentially allows you to do the same thing that Caffeine does, but it's an interesting description of the name though. But anyway, that's what that does. There's also adding external display control widget from the system tray. So typically they used to have this feature pop up when you plugged in a new monitor, which I think it'll still happen, but you can now change it at any time from the system tray with that widget. They've also done a lot of updates to Discover, including support for snaps, upgrading your system firmware, including improving the sort functions, that like adding it like based on what has been updated and things like that. So overall, there's quite a few things that are done in Discover. This particular release of Plasma is mostly a stability and polish release, so there's not a ton of new features or a ton of new fancy features specifically. So, but this time it's more like a stability and a performance improvement, which is a very good thing because not always do we need a fancy new feature to get for a release to be important. The polishing and the improvement in stability and performance is also a very important thing to do. So if you're interested, you can find a link to the post for the 5.14 release notes tomorrow. If you watch the show today, that link will go to an older post, but I'll update it tomorrow. Up next in the show is Zabbix 4.0 was released. 4.0 is the LTS, or the long-term support release for Zabbix. If you aren't aware, Zabbix is a monitoring tool to keep track of the performance and the reliability of a system, of multiple systems really, and networks. It's an open source project that allows for massive deployment and scalability. They say over hundreds of thousands of hosts could be used to be monitored by this particular piece of software. This latest version adds the enhancements of visualizations to make it easier to see more detail and more tools on one screen. And they've also made it easier to select a particular time that you'd like to see the data for. And they've added some tag-based systems for maintenance and permissions. Tag systems are really useful because it allows you to do more pinpoint accuracy of the data that you want to display and monitor. So that's a very cool thing to add. I think pretty much any piece of software, not any piece of software, but most pieces of software could benefit from having a tag system of some kind. But anyway, significant improvements to the performance and usability was also made. So if you are interested in anything like system monitoring and stuff like that, you might have heard of Nagios and stuff like that, but Zabbix has become pretty much a bigger player in that field. So if you are interested and you're using Nagios, anyway, Zabbix is available with a link in the show notes. Krita is getting ready to release the version 4.2, which will be coming in December, somewhere around December. And they've recently released a preview version of it, so you can check it out if you want to. They've done a lot of work since the last release. They improved the text editor, both in stability and usability. They've improved the overall UI and performance. And I'm excited about the color gamut masking feature. This allows you to set anchor points for around a color wheel, and then choose the particular, like say if you only want like 3 anchor points, which would make a triangle in the color wheel. and then all the colors that are intersecting with those points are a part of the color scheme of that piece of art that you're trying to make. So it makes a nice, like, it allows you to choose different shades and gradients and stuff like that in a much more clean way. And I really like the fact that they added that, and I look forward to trying it out. But Krita 4.2 is coming in a couple months, but I wanted to include it in this particular episode because they are currently running a fundraiser for the development of the project. And if you would like to financially contribute to the project, now is a great time to do that, as they only have, like, I think a little bit over a week to try it to, yeah, I think it's a little bit under a week, I'm sorry. So 6 days and 3 hours of the timing of this recording, they still have left to participate in the fundraiser if you would like to. So you'll find a link to the preview blog post as well as the fundraiser in the show notes below. Up next in the show is Umox. Umox is a graphical application for generating different color variations of the Umox theme, which is based on Numix, and also Materia themes and the Arc themes, as well as some Arc Droid icon themes. It even has a hackaround for high DPI in GTK2. I call it a hackaround because the workaround implies that it's possible to be fixed in the future, and that it's just temporary, and a hack implies that it's to modify something. So this is more like a combination of... Anyway, I kind of invented a word. I don't know if it works or not. Let me know if you think it works. So, hack around. Anyway, Umox is a really cool tool for customizing your system to make customized GTK themes a lot easier. So, it's become more and more difficult each new API update for GTK theming. So, it's really nice to see that someone made this sort of solution. For example, it used to be just CSS modifications that allow you to make a custom theme, and they've pretty much done away with that. While they still use the CSS, they now used a compressed file in order to deploy that CSS, so you have to then basically figure out how to manipulate all of that as well as the CSS itself. And this way, this is a much cleaner way of doing it. So if you are interested in using any of the themes that this piece of software supports, and you would like to customize it, this is a good option to do so. And hopefully they would be able to add some more, if they were able to get like some more contributors and something like that, they could add more themes to their project, because that would be very cool to see. What's really cool is, as well as not just the themes, they also have support for customizing your terminal, as well as, really surprisingly, the ability to customize and make Spotify themes. So I thought that was pretty cool. Now, before we go on to the next topic, I would like to point out that KDE, Plasma, and KWin, the themes for that, don't necessarily need this, because this doesn't work with those, because it's not really needed, because KDE Plasma has color controls and customizations built into itself. So you can basically do the same thing in KDE Plasma that you can with Umox. That's probably why Umox doesn't support those types of themes. But anyway, if you would like to get a link to try out Umox, you can find a link in the show notes below. Up next is some pretty big news, and that is Google Plus is going to be shut down thanks to a data exposing bug cover-up. So, let's get started with this topic. So, a security bug has allowed third-party developers to access Google Plus user profile data since 2015, until Google discovered and patched it in March this year. But they decided to not inform the public that this bug existed. And when a user gave permission to an app to access their public profile data, the bug also let those developers pull their data and their friends' data, even including non-public profile fields. So, roughly around almost 497,000 users, full names, email addresses, birth dates, gender, profile photos, places where they lived, like past and I guess current if they put that in there, occupation, and relationship status were potentially exposed to, well, I guess this is just developers, but it could have been, who knows who it could have been. Google says there's no evidence that the data was misused by the 438 apps that could have had access. But, with Google's recent reveal of this is a cover-up, is not really reassuring your statements at this point. Anyway, according to an internal memo, the company decided against informing the public because it would lead to them coming into the spotlight alongside even instead of Facebook, despite having stayed under the radar throughout the entire Cambridge Analytica scandal. Yeah, that's a cover-up. That's a refusal to admit a fault. And you may be thinking, well, what about Europe's GDPR? Wouldn't that force them to have to pay a fine because they violated the 72-hour reveal? Well, no, because this happened in March and the GDPR went into effect in May. So Google might avoid the massive fine for failing to disclose this issue due to it being patched a couple months prior to the effective date of the GDPR. But anyway, because of this issue, they've decided to shut down Google+. And they've also admitted that this review of their security, really, has crystallized what we've known for a while, that while our engineering teams have put a lot of effort and dedication into building Google+ over the years, it has not achieved broad consumer or developer adoption. Maybe because your website is a website that looks like it's mobile at all times. In order to share something, it takes 400 clicks. Maybe. It could be that. Moving on. They've seen very limited user interaction with the apps. The consumer version of Google Plus currently has low usage and engagement of 90% of the people who use Google Plus stay there for less than 5 seconds. That's because it's very painful. And that's really probably why. I mean, I would be surprised if people enjoyed using that tool, because in order to do posting anything, you have to click things, wait for pop-ups to happen, click another thing, wait for another pop-up to happen. Anyway, maybe if your website wasn't ridiculously designed, it would be usable and people might use it. Just a thought. And for people in the future, if you're making a website, try that. Make it usable. That's what Google Plus failed to do. Google Plus said they will cease all of its consumer services while winding down over the next 10 months. So it means that the complete shutdown of the consumer service of Google Plus will be in August of 2019. They also say they're going to make an enterprise version of Google Plus. Yeah, totally going to work. Moving on from some terrible security to fantastic security and always getting better is the Linux kernel. And the maintainer, the LTS stable kernel maintainer, Greg Kroah-Hartman, or Greg KH, did an interview with Linux.com by Swapnil Bhatia, and there was a really interesting interview. If you want to check out the whole thing, I'll have a link in the show notes. And there's also a video at the bottom that you might be interested in watching. It's not the full interview is not in that video, but it's still an interesting piece of it. But it's really cool because the conversation is about how the community is helping to secure Linux pretty much all the time. And with every new release, there's constantly more people working on it and fixing things. And there was even a piece of it that was talking about, or Greg was talking about this one tool that was made, that every time they make a new release, that this tool basically digs deeper and deeper until it finds more and more bugs, and that they can address them. And in the interview, he was asked, how often do you know if you solve security holes and stuff like that? And his response was, a bug is a bug. We don't know if it's a bug or if the particular bug is a security bug or not. There is actually a famous bug that I fixed, and then 3 years later, Red Hat realized it was a security hole. So they're more focused on making sure that the bugs are as few as possible. And there's always going to be bugs because software. But the fact that they constantly make these improvements, that in some cases they'll even find that these bugs that were fixed were security holes back then, but they're already fixed. So that's, Anyway, if you'd like to check out the rest of this article, you can find a link in the show notes. Up next in the show is distro news. So first up is Mageia 6.1 was released. Mageia is a interesting distribution to me because of its history and what it offers. But let's go ahead and talk about this particular release first. They updated the kernel for better hardware support, and they're using the 4.14 series, which is an LTS. So Mageia is focused a lot on LTS support in many cases, maybe even most cases. So if you're looking for a solid RPM-based distro, then this could be something that's worth looking into. Like a lot of the software is even LTS. So they have the LTS version of Plasma, the LTS version of GNOME, things like that. So if you are interested in something like that, you should check out the link in the show notes for Mageia 6.1. But what I find also is interesting about Mageia is its legacy or its history, and that is that it dates back to, it's a fork of Mandriva, which was a fork of Mandrake. And while that isn't really relevant to this particular release, I do think that is quite interesting in general, so there you go. Antix 17.2 was released this week. This is primarily a point release upgrade with new kernel patches and stuff for Meltdown Inspector and things like that, as well as various bug fixes and system upgrades, as far as like packages and things. Antix is based on Debian with a core using Debian 9.5. If you've never heard of Antix, it's a very interesting distribution based on Debian, in that a lot of Debian-based distributions come with systemd because that's what Debian comes with. But Antix decided to not include systemd, and in fact, one of the main selling points of their distribution they put in their like about section is to talk about how it's not using systemd. So if you're a person who doesn't prefer to use systemd, then you can check out Antix for a potential distribution to use. So Antix offers 4 different ISOs: full, base, core, and net. Full and base are very similar, and core and net are very similar. But base is essentially the full system, but and just enough that it'll fit on a CD. Whereas the full version is base plus a bunch of extras like LibreOffice and things like that. I mean, maybe not a bunch of extras, but a few extras. Then there's the core and net, and neither one of them come with an X server, but the core version comes with wireless networking, and the net version comes with just basically wired networking. So if you wanted to build your own distro, you could kind of look at these options as potential for that purpose. Now, Antix also comes with 4 window manager options. The interesting thing is that a lot of the times most distros will come with one of the top 10 or so, or maybe the top 5 desktop environments. But Antix has decided to forego all that and give 4 options that are very unique to a few distros. And first we'll talk about the default window manager, which is IceWM. They also have Fluxbox, JWM, and Herbstluft WM, or Herbstluft VM. I think I might have said that one correctly. Pretty close. I think it's pretty close. I'll check, but I'm pretty sure. Anyway, if you'd like to check out the latest release for Antix, you can find the link in the show notes. Up next in the show is some more distro news with Calculate Linux 18 was released. Calculate Linux is Gentoo based distribution, and this version has updated to 4.18 Linux kernel. Calculate utilities and the installation tool have all been ported to Qt 5, which is very good because Qt 4 is pretty dated, so it's nice to see when they're updating to the latest framework of the Qt toolkit. Calculate Linux offers versions of their distribution with a variety of different desktop environments, and unlike Antix, where they're using the more common desktop environments. So the first, I'm pretty sure it's default, I might be wrong, but I think it's default, is they're using KDE Plasma. Then they also have other versions for Cinnamon, Mate, and XFCE. So if you're interested in a Gentoo-based distribution, Calculate Linux is probably one of the better options because it offers a predefined binary structure for using this distribution. So if you are interested, you can find a link to that in the show notes. Up next in the show is NixOS 18.09. This is a very interesting distribution, and I'll talk about more in depth in a second. But first up, the upgrades for this particular release is there's a new version of GNOME that they're using, which is 3.28. They've got a newer version of glibc and systemd. Now let's talk about NixOS for a little bit. If you haven't heard of it, NixOS is a very interesting distribution because they have a unique approach to package management and configuration management. For just a way to describe the particular goal, what they're set to do, as NixOS says that they aim to improve the state-of-the-art in system configuration management. They say that in existing distributions, actions such as upgrades are dangerous, and sometimes they can be depending on what the distribution you're using is. But they offer atomic upgrades, which allows them to have transactional approach to configuration management. This makes it possible to do reliable upgrades and rollbacks of basically any piece of your system. So it's an interesting distribution, but just to say up front that it's not for the average user. It is a very experienced user intention distro. But if you are interested in checking it out, you can find a link to it in the show notes. Stratus 1.0 was released recently. Stratus is a new local storage management solution for Linux. If you haven't heard of this, is more like a file system management thing. So if you can be comparing it to ZFS or Btrfs or LVM. Both ZFS and Btrfs can be called volume management or managing file systems, or VMFs. These combine the file system and the volume management layers into one. Stratus, on the other hand, is technically a VMF, but it's not implemented entirely in the kernel file system. So instead, Stratus is a daemon that sits on top managing existing layers in the system. This is an interesting decision by Red Hat, because they're the people who make Stratus, because they could have just used ZFS or Btrfs, but the reason they said that ZFS is because there's a licensing issue, or more of an ambiguous licensing issue, whether the CDLL or the CDDL is compatible with the GPL. So that's an interesting reason, and I totally understand why they would have that concern. And the reason they said that Btrfs is not chosen is because it's the project needs a lot more work, but they think this direction is a better approach. So I am interested to see and curious to see how well it works with this release and in the future, to see if it's adopted by more distributions. So we'll see, and you can find a link in the show notes to check out more if you'd like to. Up next in the show, thanks to GamingOnLinux.com, we've got an update for the Steam Play whitelist. There has been a large update of over 40 titles, including Cattle Crashers, The Witness, Wolfenstein: The Old Blood, Spelunky, Stick Fight the Game, Overcooked, and Guacamelee 2. You can find a link to this article in the show notes below. Humble Bundle's been doing a lot recently, and currently they're doing the Humble Monthly, which will get you Hitman, the complete first season, 7 Days to Die, and Hollow Knight. Hollow Knight is a very interesting and popular game. I haven't played it myself, but my co-host on Destination Linux, Ryan, has said that he's a big fan of it. And 7 Days to Die is also very positive. So if you're interested, you can check out the monthly subscription or the Humble Monthly, link to that in the show notes. They actually haven't announced the rest of the games yet, because it works on the way that subscription boxes work, where as soon as it's been shipped is when people find out what's in it. So the same thing happens with this. As soon as the monthly bundle is shipped, I guess, that's when you find out what's actually in the box or in the subscription. They also have another bundle for the Humble Overwhelmingly Positive Bundle 2. Now, the Overwhelmingly Positive Bundle is the type of bundle where the games themselves have really, really positive reviews on Steam, to the point where it's classified as overwhelmingly positive by the Steam algorithm or settings and stuff. So in this particular bundle comes Nuclear Throne, Momodora, Lisa, Soma, and Opus Magnum. I've only actually ever heard of Soma, so I don't know what the rest of these are. But Opus Magnum has had a lot of... there's a lot of people who are looking forward to that and have said that it's one of their favorites. A friend of the show, Liam from Gaming on Linux, said that that's actually one of his one of his favorites in the most recent types of games he's reviewed. Anyway, if you would like to find a link, you can find a link to those in the show notes for the Humble Monthly, as well as the Humble Overwhelmingly Positive Bundle 2. And just so you know that the links in the show notes and the description are affiliate links. So if you do purchase either the subscription or the bundle from those links, it will give a benefit to Tux Digital with a small percentage commission from Humble Bundle. So if you do decide to purchase it, I would appreciate it if you were to use those links. And finally this week, the audience favorite, technology patents. Microsoft has announced that they're joining the LOT Network. This is to help protect developers against patent assertions. If you're not familiar, the LOT Network is an organization that helps members to utilize certain patents without fear of being for litigation or threat from patent trolls. So if a member is using a patent from another member, they're automatically given licensing to use said patents. So this is a way to kind of combat the patent trolling that is happening rampantly these days. Microsoft actually has been known to utilize some kind of patent trolling themselves in the past, through subsidiaries, and you could argue that the fact that they get money for every Android phone that's sold due to their patents, and because manufacturers would rather pay a fee than to go to court over it, it's you could kind of argue that that's patent trolling in a way, but that's up to you to decide, I guess. There's some also reports that Microsoft is still participating in some kind of more malicious patent trolling. I haven't really confirmed them or anything, but if you would like to check that out, there's links in the show notes for you to refer to those. But hopefully, by joining the Lot Network, Microsoft will at least limit the amount of patent trolling that can be done with their patents. They haven't really said how many patents or what specific patents are going to be added to the Lot Network, or if there's even a way for them to kind of like say whether something is available or not. I'm not really sure if the Lot Network allows you to like pick and choose what's available and what's not, but we'll see what happens with this in the future. Thanks for watching this episode of This Week in Linux. If you like what I do here on this show, please like that smash button and be sure to subscribe. If you'd like to support the channel, we have multiple ways you can contribute via PayPal, Patreon, or others. You can find out more by going to tuxdigital.com/contribute. Or you can order the Linux is Everywhere t-shirt by going to tuxdigital.com/Linux is Everywhere. Or if you're in Europe, you can go to tuxdigital.com/Linux is Everywhere EU for shipping inside of Europe. If you like some more podcasting goodness than me, then check out the latest episode of Destination Linux, as I'm a co-host of that show. Just a reminder, the show is live every Saturday, so join us in the live chat room to discuss all the latest Linux news each week. Thanks again for watching. I'm Michael Tennell with Tux Digital, and as always, keep using, learning, and enjoying Linux.